So I wanted to, ask you, basically, when you were at Brown, did you have any idea that, were you writing a lot already at Brown? Was that something that you were already doing?
Yeah, I was there 80s, 90s. So I graduated in 92. I got there in 88. And I graduated with English, honors, and creative writing. I was writing the whole time. That's what I wanted to be. So, which is kind of, it turns out later like a waste of time. Like I should have been like a bioethicist or something. That would be, because then I could write about that. And now, as you can see, I don't have a lot of life experiences, or other fields of study. I know so many friends who are medical doctors who become novelists. They have like this, they don't even write about that necessarily, but they have they've met other people. But it was great at Brown. I had Bob Coover was there. I don't know if anyone here was writing at Brown, but he's one of the last experimental novelists from the 70s. He's very hip with millennials. Like he would write parts of a story on playing cards, and then he would deal you the cards and you would have the story, that kind of thing, like randomness, chance, that kind of Merce Cunningham, John Cage vibe. He was great. He put us on computers with hyperlinked text in 1989. That's before double clicking. There was no internet. There was just this new thing, hyperlink, that Apple had come up with, where there was a little arrow above a word and you would click on the arrow and it takes you to another document. And so we were like, wow, I wonder if you could write fiction that way. And the answer is no. But it was a great class. Yeah.
He teaches at Brown. He's an associate professor now. So I know that he and Rick Moody are teaching there. So I guess, great. Yeah, I guess it's circular. What was your freshman dorm?
It was, what's it called? Morris Champlin?
Yeah, Morris Champlin. Any Morris Champlin people?
No,
nope.
No, but Emory Woolley, so I was next door.
Oh, that was right there. Yeah. So we were, Now my memory is going to fade on a lot of things. Like,
no, I'm not going to ask you to, what your favorite ratty meal was or anything of that nature. But
what did we call the place that was like a snack bar pizza place that made calzones and things?
The Gate.
Yeah, that's where I would skip breakfast and spend my meal credit at the Gate. Who would go to breakfast?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's great about having an event like this, when I noticed the people that were signing up, we had people signing up from the class of 77 to the class of 2020.
Hey.
So, at the Brown Club, we love hosting events like this that really bring just a range of people together. And I'm with you too. If I'm lucky if somebody asks me about ECDEC, if I can even remember that acronym at all,
Right, now that you say it, I know what you're talking about. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure, so where exactly were you when you got the news that you had won the Pulitzer for this book?
It's a slightly long story, but I'll make it shorter. I was working as the director of a writer's residency in Tuscany, about an hour outside of Florence. And my boss was, she's now 94-year-old Baronessa Beatrice Monte della Corte von Rizzori. And we were between groups of guests coming, because it's April 16th that it happens, but I didn't know that. So I was not paying any attention. I'd made dinner that night, and I had a friend staying, and I was training the dog to where the Baronessa had this pug, she still has, who had a spinal injury and was incontinent and would poop all over the place. And I was trying to train the dog and the Baronessa to let the dog wear diapers. And I'd gotten like suspenders that a pug can wear that are from China that will keep the diapers on, because otherwise a pug is like a cylinder. It just slides, there's no hips, it just slides off. So I'd gotten the pug into the diapers and pajamas and because Margaret Atwood was coming, and I didn't think the dog should be pooping on the floor. And I got the dog into bed with the Baronessa and said goodnight and went downstairs. It was like 9:30 or 10. And my friend showed me his phone, and it said, it was the San Francisco Chronicle. Someone had sent it to him saying, San Franciscan Andrew Sean Greer wins Pulitzer Prize. And I was like, that is not true. Because, you know, a lot of not true things can be made into images. And then I looked at my phone, we had bad cell reception, so we just never looked at our phones during dinner. And I had like 100 text messages, and they were all, the last 5 were from Chabons. Michael Chabon, Ayelet Waldman, and their 4 kids had all texted me. So I was like, I will call Michael Chabon. And I said, what is going on? And he said, you don't know? And I said, not really. He said, you won the Pulitzer Prize. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you were writing this book, did you have a feeling that this was going to be a contender in that?
No. I mean, I think when you're writing a book, nobody thinks about that. You're struggling with the book itself. Like, that's also, honestly, this is a book I didn't think anyone would publish. I wrote it totally for my own enjoyment because I was like, well, like no one's, I had publishers turn down, like my first publisher let me go, and then my next publisher let me go, and my British publisher let me go. And I was like, well, you know, apparently I can't please anybody. So I'm just going to write something to please myself. And so this is what I wrote. My agent was very surprised and confused when I turned in a few chapters. So not a lot of encouragement, but I was like, what do I have to lose? You know, it's not like I'm a bestseller now and I'm letting everyone down. So I was absolutely happy when the book had already, because the book had been out like 9 months. So Pulitzer Prize wasn't on my mind at all. Like it was long gone. I was getting ready for paperback, and I liked that people had bought it and liked it. And I was perfectly happy with the response already. Like I was good, but I did quit my job.
Well, I just, you know, before I open it up to questions from the group, I just really want to thank you for writing it, especially because I had a chance to reread it, you know, this week for the club. And right now to have the ability to kind of armchair travel and laugh a little bit at the same time has been it was just a really wonderful thing to have, you know, at this point in time. You know, I just want to thank you for that. It was really great. So
that's good to hear.
So why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions?
I have a question.
Hey, Adrienne. Good.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say that my former boss is totally jealous right now that he loves your book. His name is Les, actually. His first name is Les.
Oh.
And he's gay. He's from San Francisco. He lives in Berlin right now. As soon as I finished the book, I just like texted him because we're friends now. And I was like, oh my God, you have to read this book. He's like, 4 people told me that today. And when he finished it, he was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. And I told him that I was going to be part of this. And he's just beyond jealous. He's in Berlin right now, but that's not my question. My question is, reading the book, because if I remember right, Les has the change of, starts the book that he's writing was serious, and then he changed it to a comedy. Did that happen to you while you were writing this book?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, that's why it's in there. I'm now embarrassed by all the things I put in that are awfully close to home. I spent about a year writing a book. He wasn't named Arthur Less. He didn't look like him or very much like that, but Freddie was there and Carlos was there. It had the premise, I guess, was similar. He didn't travel. It was just him walking around San Francisco being really thoughtful. And I couldn't stand it, you know, like it was just so You know, I think I finally decided I was going to write a book with a gay male protagonist. And then I realized the world I'm in, it's just like a man of great privilege, you know? Like, it's not easy to be gay in other parts of the world, and you're murdered for it. And, you know, even now, in Trump's America, it's getting harder. But in San Francisco, if you own property in the Castro, it's hard to feel sorry for that person, no matter what they're doing. I'm a white guy. So I just couldn't get the juice out of it, because I'm like, stop complaining. That's all. Like, I was like, how can I make the reader feel for this guy? And I finally was like, I think the only way is to make fun of him, you know. And to make fun of him, the best way is to make him more like me, and make fun of me, and put my most humiliating experiences and memories and some of my friends in there, and that made it really fun.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing. I loved your book. I sort of waffled between like laughing and crying. It was a very interesting experience. Hopefully it's not controversial since it's been out for a while if I ask you about the end.
Well, if anyone's at the end, it's a book club, so you're...
Yeah, okay. I was blown away by the whole narrator surprise. And I was just wondering if you knew all along writing this book and then writing it in third person, that who the narrator was going to be, because I was completely surprised, and I'm not usually surprised. But I was wondering, you know, did you know it the whole time? Did you have to go back? I mean, it was out of the blue for me. And then the way it happened, I loved it, because then it really felt like a love story. And anyway, so I was just curious about that. If you intended it all along, how did that even work to write it that way?
Oh, that's a great question. I never get to answer that, because I'm usually, people haven't read the whole book, or they don't want to, it's an interview or something. Yes, I knew the whole time that's what I wanted to do, because I stole the technique from Vladimir Nabokov from his book Penin, which has a hidden narrator in it. And he it's one of my favorite books. But I think at the end, when he deploys this device, it doesn't really do very much, because it's no one you know. It doesn't quite work to me. And so I remember thinking, I would love to do that, but make it, when you find out who is telling the story, you realize that the story is not making fun of the person. The story is a love letter to that person and all of his flaws, and that the sort of mocking tone is of someone who loves those flaws and loves this person. And so that was always my idea. And when I first turned this into my editor, she had lots of notes, but her main note that she saved until late in the talk, she said, "I don't think we need the surprise ending."
Oh, I think that's like the best part.
I know. Well, she said, "I think if we've enjoyed ourselves all this way, you don't want to lose the readers through some trick. You should just end it beautiful. We've enjoyed ourselves for 200 pages. Don't make it fall apart." And I said, "I hear what you're saying. You're saying the rest of the book isn't working." I will, because this is the advice I give students. I'm like, if someone tells you to take out your, like, if they're like, it's all wonderful about this marriage falling apart, but at the end when he sees a mermaid, that just is crazy. Now, I want to get rid of that. And it's like, well, no one needs another story about a marriage falling apart, but everyone needs a mermaid at the end. So like, fix the rest of the story to make the mermaid seem inevitable. So I went back through the book and tried to change it so that it would feel inevitable. And so I added a lot more of the narrator saying, "I know that," like something that I think irritates readers when they first read it. They're like, "I don't want to hear this, sort of thing." But I thought also, if I took a kind of 19th century tone where the narrator often says, like, like in Madame Bovary there's a sort of first person who knows details and says like, now I would never have done this, or like, we shall never know what happened behind that door, you know, like that kind of narrator, which made it more fun. And I think for me as a writer, when I find the voice in which I can write the story, meaning like where it's told from, like, is it present tense, and like, are they able to go into the mind of the person, like what don't they know? Once I pick the right thing, then it's a blast. And so this one, I had a narrator who could do everything because it was first person and third person at the same time, so I could pick what I wanted.
So I have a comment on that. It's not a question, but I feel like book club, usually we get to just comment. We don't have to ask questions. But so I read the book a year or two ago, but just yesterday I read the beginning and I read the end because I remembered I loved the end. And I thought what was interesting going back and reading the beginning is that Freddie is there talking about the first time he met Les, but I didn't notice that the first time I read the book. And so hearing your question and hearing your answer, Andrew, it's like, oh, well, yeah, now I see that the narrator was there the whole time, but it was lost on me the first time. And I think it's a fun thing about owning a book, having actually bought a book and being able to pick it back up again and sort of see those things that I missed the first time. But I'm really glad you convinced your editor not to change the ending, because that was, to me, that was the book.
I'm so glad. Well, I mean, luckily the contract is that like, I'm the only one who can change the ending. She would have to persuade me, but it took being pretty, having been around the block enough times to, as another local San Franciscan, Daniel Handler, has said to me, he was swimming with me when I decided to make it a comedy. We go swimming every morning, not these days, but he said, you know, your editor thinks they're the doctor, but they're not the doctor. They're the patient. You're the doctor. They're the ones who come in and they say, my arm is hurting. I think it's arm cancer. And you're the one who says, there's no such thing as arm cancer. Let me take a look at it. I will tell you what to do to fix it. Like, editors don't fix. They tell you where it hurts, and that's all they know, because they can't see the thing in your head, what you want it to be. So you have to, and hopefully you get an editor who knows that, which I luckily have, like a few times. They sit back and they don't tell you, why don't you change the genders on it? You know, like that's nonsense. They don't know what you're going for. So great, I'm glad. She was very happy with it.
Also, when I go to my office, one of our conference rooms, my floor is named after authors, and one is named after Daniel Handler. So you should just tell him that.
Really? I
actually don't know who he is. I've never looked him up, but I'm going to now. But you should tell him there's a conference room at Google in San Francisco named after him.
He may know that. I wonder if he's the writer. He's Lemony Snicket. He wrote those children's books, A Series of Unfortunate Events. Yeah. So I will tell him that. I think he'll be pleased.
Was his salient editor comment the reason you dedicated the book to him?
Oh yeah, it's dedicated to him. No, he's my best friend, and I see him. We used to go swimming every day at the Dolphin Club here in San Francisco at the aquatic park in the bay itself. And we would talk about our work and then often go to breakfast and sit and work in a cafe on Clement Street usually. And now we chat once or twice a day just to catch up with each other and see if anyone's getting any work done, which is hard these days. But we're both slowly getting things done. Yeah.
Well, I have a question about working as a writer, not about the book. It's been, 18 months since I read the book, and I really enjoyed it, but it's not top of mind right now. But I was surprised when in your introduction to us, you referred to a couple people as your boss. And I think of writers as being like totally independent. What's your day like as a writer? Or what's your year like as a writer? Or how is your life different now than it was 5 years ago as a writer? what kind of jobs do you have as a writer?
Well, right now, I mean, I don't have a boss right now, but almost every writer.
Because you won the Pulitzer Prize?
Basically, yeah.
Things?
It changed things. It meant that, and it took me a while to realize that it would change things. It meant that I didn't have to have I mean, I could just work at this as my job for a few years, because there's like speaking engagements and you sell some books. And so, you know, because I've always had a day job of one kind or another, and this was just another one to me. I've always had a boss, but I haven't for about 2 years now, a little less. Just because, you know, this is what I want to do. I do, but I have also always been like a journalist, I was a travel writer. I can't be a travel writer right now. My last travel piece came out in March. And a food writer and that kind of thing. I think most writers have this sort of like, they patch together whatever they can to make money, and you have to hustle a lot. But it makes I mean, it's embarrassing that it makes it easier once you win a prize like this, that people say, sure, write something for us, you know? And I remember to be a travel writer, I had a friend who worked at Travel and Leisure, and I said, I want you to introduce me to your boss. And she's like, yeah, but it won't matter. We don't have anything now. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to show up in a really brightly colored outfit. You introduce me to him. That's all. We go to lunch. And then later when you're at a meeting and they're like, who should we get to write this article? You'll say, how about my friend Andy? Who? He was the one in that really brightly colored outfit. All right. You know, like, and that's exactly what happened. And they sent me to Barcelona just because like he remembered my outfit. So it's like ridiculous, but like, and I'm not much of a hustler, like, but most writers have to do something like that. But now my days here, it's hard to explain, but normally before all this, my day would be get up and go to pick up Daniel Handler at around 7:15 in the morning and drive to Aquatic Park and go swimming, and then drive back and have breakfast, and usually head back home and walk up the hill to my office and work there for about 4 hours. I don't know the internet code at my office, so I can only read or write or nap, and I sure do the reading and writing, and I mean the reading and napping. And then I'm free once I write 1,000 words. Once you win a prize, you'll never write again. It was hard right after I won, because then there was a year where there was all kinds of fun stuff I could do. I'd never traveled to a literary festival before, and then suddenly I got invited to them. So I wanted to say yes to all of them, but Daniel Handler would say, I think you need to write your novel. But then I would say, no, I'm going to India. I'm sorry. Because it would be these quite incredible things, but I turned down a lot of them just so I could work instead, because I thought, this is not what it's about. It's about the writing. I'll go to South Africa some other time. Yeah.
Is there a country that you wish you would be invited to for a festival if, the world returns to habitable travel?
Yeah, I want to go back to Japan. I was there in November for this travel article, and I'd gone once before, very briefly. You can tell from the novel that I did not spend very much time there, so I made it very, very, very small. Yeah, I want to go there, but I don't think they have those kind of festivals in Japan that I know about, not for work and translation. But I didn't know about the other ones too, so who knows, maybe. But they're all the festivals that I know of now, they're closed down or they're going virtual, that kind of thing. And that might be some of the future, but I think there is a joy in seeing a writer that you like live in person and getting a sense of their real personalities.
Are the places that less went in the book your favorite places that you've traveled? Or was there a reason that you chose those particular places?
I chose them because that's where I had either been to or could get to cheaply. Mostly I wrote them, in fact, in those places, and some of them I went to in order to put them in the book. The hardest one, you know, like Japan, I pitched an idea to United Airlines about writing about artisans in Kyoto so that I could just get to Japan, because I can't afford to go to Japan. And they went for it. So I went to Japan, and I secretly took notes on food instead. I didn't, the artisans aren't in the novel, obviously, just so I could do it. India was the hardest to figure out how to go, because you can't just show up in India. You have to kind of have a purpose or know someone or something like that. So I found an artist residency in India that I went to. Yeah.
You addressed it briefly at the beginning, but there's such a, I mean, Brown is so famous for its experimental fiction and that whole tradition. I know you went there's an undergrad, which is a little different, but I'm very curious how you see yourself relating to that. And particular, you mentioned a little bit about what did you learn? How do you think it changed you as a writer to somehow be, you're in that through the training you had, for at least through Coover, and I assume you must have known and read some of the other people that came. I mean, there's so many wonderful novelists that have come out of that whole school, but it's also just what they taught you.
Yeah, it was very experimental when I was there, and I think I would have called myself an experimental writer all the way into graduate school. And also, you know, I was, the literature department was literary criticism, so I was very interested in taking apart books or thinking about how it would be read, and I, you know, I didn't want to write something normal. I learned a funny lesson in graduate school, though. I went to the University of Montana, not known for experimental fiction, because that's where I got in. And I kept writing experimental stories that were fragmented, or you know, I loved it, and no one knew what was going on. And then, as an arrogant joke, I wrote a very straightforward story about a gay man and a lesbian who get married as cover for each other, and their 30 years of their marriage. And I was like, I'm just going to write it like all in chronological order and in first person and with description and all the crap they like. And it was the best thing I'd ever written. And I realized that I was better at that. And I didn't want to be, you know? I was not happy about that. And it took me a while to accept it, that I had to do what I was actually good at. And certainly, I think, you know, the books I've written, I don't think of them as experimental, but at the time I wrote them, they were, in the sense of they were genre bending. And I also had the trick of, I started writing, you know, in the late 90s, I started publishing mid 90s stories. I had to write gay fiction that people would actually publish. No one was publishing gay short stories in magazines. There were editors got fired at Esquire for trying to publish David Levitt. So I had to write kind of coded things that you would enjoy without quite knowing what I was writing about. It's weird to think about that now. And so a bunch of my early work, my short stories certainly, and then there's gay characters in my novels, but there's also sort of, they're metaphorically gay in some way. So that's what I was struggling with mostly at the beginning. And then this book, I can't think of it as experimental, except that I wanted to do something really weird. I wanted a gay novel that was full of joy instead of despair. And there are plenty out there, but I wanted a particular kind of one, and it was missing on my shelf, and so that's why I wanted to write it. which isn't experimental, but it is challenging.
When your books are translated into other languages, do you participate in that? And is there anything that was funny that ever came out of a weird translation?
Are you wearing a brown sweatshirt?
No, I didn't even go to. I've dated men that went to brown, but.
Okay, all right. No, I don't, I don't know enough of other languages. I give them a lot of instruction. Like this one, for less, I had a big list of things. And the most important thing I said, that the whole point of the book is that the joke is on him. When he goes to these foreign countries, everyone there is perfectly normal and leading normal lives, and he's the thing that's out of place. So please don't make it the kind of travelogue of the white man and going, seeing how funny things are other places. That is not what this is. This is the travelogue of a white man traveling and realizing how ridiculous he is. So, and that has to do with language in the sense of like, I don't want you to italicize words that are the right word for something. Like, I don't want déjà vu italicized. That's the correct word. Unless someone is actually speaking a word that your audience will not understand, don't italicize it, because it makes it look foreign, and it isn't. It's the correct word, So if it's, we don't italicize sushi. We've gotten used to it. And so pay attention to not make an us, them, even within the language. And I was like, and especially the part where he's speaking German, the joke, I hope you understand, because I had some translators that said, I think we're going to, oh God, what were they going to do? Not make it German or something. They didn't get the joke, that the joke was that his German is terrible. And so they were, I don't know, they were going to do something not funny at all. And I was like, no, I hate like reading a book and about English speakers that travel to another country and they make fun of how the other people speak English with a funny accent. And I'm like, they learned your language. Don't laugh at them. You don't know theirs. So you're the one who's the problem. So I thought I didn't want that. So when I got to Germany, I thought, I can't have people with funny German accents. I'll just have him be the one with the funny accent. But it was hard to communicate that to translators. But most translators, they want to know little things, or I give them real problems. I had a book, Story of a Marriage, in which there's one page where they speak in palindromes to each other, sentences that read the same backwards and forwards. And what can you do? There's nothing to be done about it. They have to find their own palindromes, and if their language has that, but they certainly didn't ask me about it. They just figure it out mostly on their own. But I am friends with some of my translators, especially in Italian, because I spend a lot of time there. And translator Eleanor Dalpra will write me and say, do you have a book coming out this year? I only do one book a year, and I'll do yours if you have one. And I'm like, nope, not at all.
I guess the German editor didn't try and correct when you were saying one of your characters was saying to Les that his German was excited. I guess, did the editor have a little laugh at that?
I think they really enjoyed that. I actually read that part. They hired an actor. They do that in Germany. They'll hire an actor, like a well-known actor from a TV show, to do a reading with you because they want to draw people in. And we were on a boat on the Rhine. And it was like moving. and it was a big audience for me. And of course they actually understood English. So I would read my part and they would, about the bad German, and they would laugh. But then when the actor read his part, that was actually in German, they just loved it. Because I think they're the ones being made fun of most of the time, and they liked the tables being turned. But I don't know what the translation was. I don't know German, but I've taken it because I lived in Berlin briefly, like Adrienne's boss. And I understood the shape of it. And so I tried to make the mistakes that someone could make. So they're not just made up, mostly, yeah. It's a good way to waste time, you know, rather than write a paragraph. You're like, I'll pick one particular word and figure it out for an hour. It's very satisfying work.
That all of Les's different experiences that were so delightful throughout the world. Some of them were based on real things, and some of them, I think you happen to have friends of yours. Do you have any like stories behind those that you want to mention?
Oh, you'd think I would. I mean, because some of them are utterly made up, and some of them are totally true down to every detail. And I know which they are, but the weird thing about fiction is that I'm hoping none of you will, because it's supposed to it's an illusion. But I will say that at my high school reunion, I was asked to present an evening with Andrew Sean Greer. And I did go to the auditorium for the event, and nobody was there. That was true. Yeah, that's the last thing I added to the book, because I was like, what's another humiliating event? Oh, I have one. That was really awful. And then I went to the like 80s dance party the next night, the real reunion, and everyone was like, how was the event? And I was like, well, no one came. And they said, oh, wow. Yeah, no, we were all at a bar. And we just wanted to make an event for like all the other people to go to, meaning like the nerds. That's why they made my event, because all the popular people wanted to go to a bar and they didn't want us to go there. So they made a nerdy event. But nerds don't come to reunion unless you specifically invite them to do a reading. I couldn't believe it. It was so shocking. And then afterwards, they were like, we're all going to Melissa Hirsch's place for a party. I'm like, great. And I don't know how to get there. And they're like, sure you do, it's Melissa's. I'm like, I've never been to Melissa's house. So I had to follow someone, and we were at the party, and people kept saying, boy, remember like the times we had here? And I would be like, I've never been in this house. I've never been. And they never got it. That like, it was uncool. Like, it's okay. I'm all fine. They were lovely people, but like, they still didn't understand that it was an exclusive club that like, they have to give up on that or be like, oh my God, we were such jerks. But so it goes.
And where was this in the US? Where was this?
It was Georgetown Days.
Where did you grow up?
Washington, DC.
Has anyone from your high school mentioned that part of the book? Who went to the reunion?
No.
Oh, interesting.
No one's ever mentioned that. Well, that's often the thing. I remember once a friend of mine, Sarah Manguso, she called me up and she said, I'm really worried about this story that I want to put in my book, but it's like, it's a little personal about a family member and I just don't know. And I said, you know what? Don't worry. No one will ever read it. That is mostly true. Like, you can put things in your books because like usually people don't read them. Now, mine is suddenly the exception to that. Like that, I'm like, that's why I'm like, oh my God, there's some things in there I don't want people to know. But no one brings that up. And you know, now I feel bad making fun of it. But oddly, I didn't put Brown in there at all. I don't think. Yeah, he doesn't talk about his schooling. Yeah, so it didn't make it in, although I had so many good stories there too.
Perhaps not as scarring as the high school reunion.
That was the thing. I had a really good time at Brown. You know, it wasn't scarring. It wasn't, well, it was humiliating in the normal ways. Yeah.
I have another question. One thing that I loved about the book was this whole notion of the fact that Arthur says, and you sort of, that he's never seen anyone grow old, and you know, he's gay and he hasn't seen anyone grow old because of the AIDS crisis. And I just thought that was such an interesting narrative throughout the book. And then you have your other novel that's also about aging, the Max Tivoli. And I was just wondering, you know, is this like something that you like, you just have, I don't know, are you have a secret obsession about aging? Like, what do you, like, is this, I don't know, something that you think about, or how did you think
And
about
do you not think about aging?
No.
And maybe you don't. I mean, I would say that it is, yeah, it's my vanity showing in both books, because Max Tivoli I wrote, I had turned 30, and I was worried that I was ancient, the way, I mean, 30-year-olds do. And now I turned 50 in November, so, and all my friends have been turning 50, and so I think I was watching it approach. But I was watching it approach and realizing that I didn't have role models about how to be, particularly now. Certainly there's a generation of men who survived the AIDS pandemic or HIV positive, but are, you know, thriving now, friends of mine. They're all still around my age, or maybe 60. Like, I haven't seen a whole lifespan of, you know, Rock Hudson being an out gay man, getting old, making, you know, it's like Ian McKellen might be something, but you can pick one or two. There's not like tens of thousands to know. So I was finding that among my gay friends, there was, I could see a struggle about clinging to boyhood at 50, which is still my plan. Or like going, or Bear, like Bear was a sort of, I mean, I think many San Francisco will know that, like big husky men with beards was a kind of like revelation for a lot of my friends at middle age, that it could actually be themselves and be sexy and sort of invent a new category. And that was super successful, but that doesn't work for me because I look like this. So like I go to a Bear party and I'm, you know, the last person served at the bar. It's very tedious, but so I'm like, I can't be a bear, or like a silver daddy, or like a macho muscle guy. Like, I don't know which way, where does it go? Yeah. So it interested me. It interested me also because it's a comedy, but I wanted to think about some of the hardest things and saddest things, and that's where comedy comes from. And so that paragraph is about the saddest thing that I had to live through, which was the AIDS pandemic. You know, that was really terrifying. That was at Brown mostly, because I think they came up with a cocktail in the mid 90s. So it was terrifying, you know, in the 80s. And I didn't present that of his youth, but I just touched upon it there and made it sort of funny, because rather than say he feels like the first gay man to grow old, I use the word homosexual to grow old because it's such a funny word. So in fact, most of the book I say homosexual because I think it's funny. It's ridiculous. It's too many syllables, yeah.
I have a question, if you don't mind. You brought up being at Brown during kind of the height of the AIDS epidemic. Can you talk about what that was like as a college student? I'm about a decade younger than you, so by the time I was at Brown, it was, I was there 2000 to 2004, so it was just after the good drugs had come out, and it just wasn't, it was like it didn't exist anymore. And so I'm wondering what that was like on a college campus.
Oh, it was, I mean, Brown did a really good job of educating, but we were at a point in 1988, 89, where they didn't even know how you got it. I know that sounds crazy, but we were being told that you could get it from deep kissing. And that, when I hadn't even been kissed before, was pretty nerve-wracking on top of everything else. And they were handing out dental dams and expecting lesbians to use those. And some did very diligently, but although it turns out that like women really don't pass it to women with any frequency worth talking about. So it was a sort of waste of dental dams and everyone's fun sex time. and like, you know, you're supposed to give a blowjob over a condom. So that's why they're mint flavored. Like, ugh, if you haven't ever had sex and that's the first time you try that, it's like not, it's always very, something that was already terrifying, sex, romance, kissing, was made doubly so. But Brown was really good. We had that organization, which at the time was called the LGBT. It was the LGBA, and then they added T, LGBTA. And it was a really great group of people, but it was small. It was like 20 people. And that was so nice, but then it turned out that no one would date me, because if they were seen on campus with me, I was an out gay man, everyone would know he was gay. So I didn't really date at Brown much because I was too out. You know, we would have weird events like kiss-ins where we would go to the green, I don't know what it's actually called. You know, what's the big green called?
That's
Big green. And like, yeah, you would find someone, a same-sex person to kiss you, not your boyfriend or girlfriend, because there weren't very many of those, just so that people would get used to seeing that. Which just seems so crazy now. There was certainly no holding hands or any of that. It was, that's what was strange. But Brown was cool, you know. We got funding for one night a month at the, what was the bar called? The Russkeller? At the bottom of, you know, it was like
The Underground?
the Underground. Is that what it was called? There'd be like funk night and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The one night a month was like LGBT night. And that's when Madonna was putting out like a Prayer and all that stuff. And it was great. Like because we couldn't go to the like 2-3 gay bars in Providence. We did, but like you had to get an ID, that kind of thing. So we could go to that and actually like meet other people. I'm still in touch with my first boyfriend at Brown. He's a dancer in New York City.
What was your graduation speech about?
Oh yeah, I gave the commencement speech, but as you might recall, it's like the student speakers are voted on by the other students. So it's not like Brown elected me. And my friend Alarity, we were best friends, and we were playwrights. I didn't plan to be a playwright, but Alarity discovered that Brown Brokers, the theater group, would fully fund a full production of a musical if it won a contest. And she's like, we got to do that. So twice we won that and had our shows put up, which was great. That was one of my favorite parts of Brown. And our speech was about, it was the two of us going back and forth. It was about having 2 bags going forward in the future, having 2 bags packed in your closet so that if your life turns into something you don't like, you can just leave it and you don't get trapped in something. What did we know? But before the speech, Larrabee and I had decided we were going to give an unscripted comment about, at the time, Brown did not have need blinds admissions, so they would look at your possibility of paying before they admitted you, which was gross, and which soon changed after that. But we wanted to bring it up again because we just thought it was you were not getting the best. There were all these people at school who were like wealthy Europeans who were stupid. You know, we were like, it's so clear what's going on. I don't think it makes Brown look very good. It makes it just look like a finishing school. So we brought that up, and it was like a riot in that church. It was, people were either furious or like hugely supportive. And we talked about how it hasn't been easy for people of color or for gay people, and no one wanted to hear that. Like, that was not popular by a large group of Brown students. And it was really hard to get the crowd back together so we could do our actual speech. And the president had to pull on our robes and say, okay, start going, just keep going, keep going.
Was that the year of the student takeover of University Hall for New
Oh
Zealand?
yeah, it was, yeah. You did that, yes. Yeah, I did not do that. I did not go in University Hall, but most of my friends did. That sounded like a great time, honestly. And it sounded like Brown kind of took it well. They're like, oh yeah, the 70s, we remember. Yeah, that's totally what you guys do. Go for it. And they didn't really fight it very much, yeah.
So why did they take over university? I can remember hearing about like in the 70s, and I can't remember if we did it in the 80s with apartheid, but why did they do it your year?
It was the need blinds admissions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because it was also, it felt like it was connected to letting in people of color or allowing any kind of diversity in the school was being held back by this, you know, it was already expensive, you know, I don't want to know what it is now, but, and, you know, not a huge endowment. And so they would, you know, they were struggling to figure out how to do that. And then the next president after Martin Gregorian came along, and it just seemed like a clear move. But we were furious.
Yeah.
It's not very
I remember when Amy Carter got dismissed from Brown because she was going to too many apartheid rallies. So she never went to class. So they had to kind of say, sorry, president's daughter, but.
You just could have taken them pass fail, right? Or whatever it was, credit, no credit, or yeah, satisfactory, no credit. I did that for half my classes. That was a real great way to go. Well, it let me take science classes, you know. And it turned out for my career that my grade point average didn't matter. So it didn't matter. Yeah, most people. Well. I was in a singing group, male a cappella singing group. I was in the Jabberwocks for 4 years.
It's still around.
Yeah.
Did the Jabberwocks go co-ed?
Have they gone co-ed?
I thought I read that they had, or.
I heard, I mean, they have a whole reunion of alumni group and everything, but I heard they had really gone downhill. And not that co-ed is downhill, but that they were just like kind of losers for a while. And so I think like Need Blind Admissions, they were like, why don't we get some good singers? We could bring women in and actually make it a musical group again, instead of, it was so preppy when I was part of it. I couldn't believe it. Like navy jackets with a special gold pin, and there was a ceremony where you got the pin. We had a room, you know, at where all the fraternities were, that quad, Keeney? Riston quad, and a room there, and had like painting above the doorway about drinking. It was so crazy. But I thought it was so exotic because it was like a fraternity.
I loved going to the a cappella concerts. That might have made me a loser too, but you know.
Well, the whole thing was, what I loved about it was like, I was a loser for being in it, but no one knew that. Like, it was great. Like, looking back, I'm like, we filled that whole sales hall or whatever I couldn't believe, it was so fun. But I have not, and I've kept in touch with a bunch of those guys. Now I hope it's girls. Also, like a whole group of guys, I got to hear what straight guys talk about when women aren't around.
I think I was a freshman when you were a senior, and the Jabberwocks were a very big deal.
Right, we were a big deal. We were, I don't know, something. I think they became not a big deal later. They had money problems, I think.
They were still a big deal when I was there, but that was a while ago.
Yay, I'm glad. I went to one reunion.
They actually came to San Francisco, I think it was 3 years ago, to perform for, you know, their fans across the country. And the only place we could fine for them to perform was in the stairwell at Fort Mason. So they did an entire concert in one of the stairwells in Fort Mason. I did not notice any women at that particular concert. It was raining.
Are there women in there?
Yeah, women in there.
Oh, there were women in there? Okay.
With the stairwell, that seems fitting because arches are the right place to sing, right? And so stairwells seem like the second best.
But that logo, that's the same logo that we invented, because actually the Jabberwocks were, at the time I joined, they were wearing white tuxedos because it's the 80s, and like not very well thought of, so that we like redid the whole image as much more preppy, in fact, and got someone to draw that Jabberwocks thing that looks like a heavy metal logo and all that stuff. I can't believe it's still there. That makes me a little happy.
Well, if you decide to get your old buds together for a reunion concert, let us know. We can do kind of a Zoom reunion concert for you guys and promote it. It would be wild.
I think that would be hilarious. I'll
put it out there. Put it out there.
Sang about that. I was never the greatest singer in the group, but Andrew Chaikin lives here in the Bay Area. He was one, and he became a like a sort of DJ. He's Kid Beyond, and he does like beatboxing and throat singing and all kinds of stuff. He still has a big career from being the beatboxer of our group. It's not something I talk about very much. True. And I was not a great soloist, but they would throw me some. I would sing one that was called 16, which turns out to be like a really creepy song, because it's like, she was 16, only 16, and I was too young to know. That's the song I sang. It's like a 1950s doo-wop song, and it's like, ew. And we would sing it for alumni, but I hope that is not in there. And I had some other song, I'm trying to remember what it was, but not much. I was just I was a tenor too. I would just back them up. But it was great fun. We went on the road and everything, and we went to Florida or something. I don't know. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming. It's
Thank
nice
you.
to think about Brown. I have such fond memories.
Also, it's nice to see you in person because it makes me realize that this looks kind of like you.
Yeah, it does, right? Yeah.
Illustrator
Illustrator
does. The internet does.
Yeah.
Do you have a blue suit?
Yeah.
Ah.
Bright blue.
Not as blue as I made it in the book, but I remember ordering it in Vietnam and it arriving and being like, "Whoo, oh, wow, that's not what I was thinking, but I'll wear it." But then I would wear it and I'd be like, "I love it." And I just didn't, and I thought it would be nice to give it to Les because he doesn't realize that it looks so vulgar, and so it doesn't matter. You know, it's his innocence that's charming about him, I hope.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a great thing to end on. Thank you so much for your time, and we really look forward to what you have next in store for us. And if you can make the Jabberwocks reunion happen, you have our contact information.
I do. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.